This is supposed to be a short discussion on the paper that Professor Bande had already very well articulated. And I think it speaks to the state of democracy in our country and how to enhance national cohesion and good governance. But I think it's right to start by acknowledging that all over the globe, democracy is in retreat. And that recession is probably even more intense on our continent when you see the rise of militarism again across the Sahel. And at least in the last 2-3 years, we've had failed and successful coup d'etats in 9 countries. 6 of that in our own region, West Africa. In Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, of course in Niger, right on top of us, in Chad, and then in Guinea-Bissau. 6 in the last 2 years. If we stretch that a little further, we've seen this also happen in Equatorial Guinea. We've seen it happen in down south. And of course, authoritarianism is on the rise across the globe, including populist authoritarianism on the back of democratic support. Some leaders have used the instrumentality of constitution to even create constitutional coups. We've known and heard of third-term agendas across the board in many countries. So clearly, we have had to deal with this, and all surveys, major respected surveys of the quality of democracy around the world, speak to these issues, whether it is Freedom House or on our continent, the Mo Ibrahim Governance Index, or even the Afrobarometer. All these surveys speak to a decline in the quality of our democracy. But that decline does not necessarily align with our people's commitment to democracy. Our people are still very, very committed. And Afrobarometer actually speaks to 80% of Africans still believe in democracy, and 80% reject one-party rule or one-man rule, or 66% reject military rule. However, that same survey, the latest survey of Afrobarometer in 2025, speaks to a growing acceptance for military overthrow of democratic government where the leaders have captured the instruments of governance and subverted it against the people. In our own country, we know that there is a certain level of resentment that democracy has not delivered the goods in terms of economic benefits, improved quality of life, security, and progress, generally speaking. That is cumulative. It's not something that you blame on one particular administration, but after 25, 26 years of democratization, Nigerians are not happy with what they are seeing. They may not be calling for coup d'etat or calling for a Venezuelan type intervention, but they are generally displeased with the quality of our democratization. And clearly, many of us in this room are players in that space. And that is why we have here people who have extensive experience of looking at these issues and coming to the conclusion, how do we improve the quality of our democracy? How do we improve on inclusivity? How do we address this winner-take-all problem that we have, in which you can be a minority winner that discounts and excludes other voices in a democratic project? And how do we ensure that those levers of democracy, elections, the media, the judiciary, the legislature, are not subverted in the process of improving the quality of democratization? I've got here with me Professor Utomi, who has been at the barricades for long, with us in the anti-military struggle, along with Dr. Osman Bugaje, and of course our former chair in the House of Representatives, my sister, the chair of Foreign Relations Committee. My sister Eugenia Abu talked about me taking on broadcasting as a new profession. I think she forgot that I was a broadcaster. I ran Radio Kudirat, and that was a tool of democratization and democracy. So I'm still in the business of broadcasting. So, Prof, how do we deal with these issues? You have 5 minutes, because our audience is fast losing patience.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished. This is a very serious matter, because if we don't deal with it honestly and digest it well and do something, let me tell you what the possibilities are. Because sometimes we forget what the outcomes can be. We can be Sudan. It is very possible. And so we all need to be very sensitive discussing this matter. Democracy matters. The Afrobarometer surveys that the moderator referred to at a think tank in Washington, where I was a fellow until a few months ago, we actually had the leaders of the Afrobarometer team come and spend time with us, deeply analyzing the test results. Very clear. The point is that Africans want democracy, but they don't like what they see. They don't like state capture, which is what has happened in many countries. They don't like politicians making politics about themselves and not the people. And they don't like the kinds of institutions that are responsible for shepherding a democracy. Many people would like to see everybody who's been in INEC in jail in this country. I can tell you that. Most ordinary Nigerians would like to see that. But how do we reasonably resolve those problems? We have to very sensibly recognize that democracy is about how to give our children a better tomorrow. If we recognize that, then as people, I mean, thankfully, most of us here have now hit 60 and gone past it. One of the things we know is that life is very short, and all this vanity disappears very quickly. The only thing that matters is the immortality of giving our children the possibility of saying, our forebears gave us a better life. And democracy can make that happen. I turn to my Asian friends. I've said to severally that I've stopped using Asian examples because people think it's far away, esoteric. The other day somebody was interviewing me and quoted a page from Lee Kuan Yew commenting on Nigeria in 1975. I said, look, I used to give that example. I particularly like to give the example of Mahathir Mohamad and inclusion. You know, Mahathir Mohamad borrowed from Lyndon Baines Johnson after the race riots in Malaysia, after he was expelled from UMNO and then eventually recalled. The point that it is better for everybody to be inside the house, pissing out, than for some people to be outside the house, pissing in. Nigeria cannot make progress. I want to bet anybody here. Divisive nature of society we have now. We won't make any progress. We can deceive ourselves. But inclusion is the first thing. How do we ensure that everybody is inside the house so we can be piecing out rather than outside that house? How do we build institutions that ensure accountability? Government, democracy is about accountability. If you don't have accountability, we're talking about tax. Where did tax become really an issue? Because taxation without representation is essentially a non-starter in a democratic order. That's the Boston Tea Party. Where is the representation that ensures that you can tell how the money that you are taxed, that is collected from your tax, is used? It's not by civil servants running around in SUVs. Go to Egypt. Like I said, I don't give Asian examples anymore. Go and look at what President Sisi is doing in Egypt. The enormous progress he's making everywhere. And you don't see civil servants or politicians running around in SUVs because they are accounting for the use of the people's resources in different ways.
Thank
we
you.
have not encouraged that to happen in our country.
Okay. Inclusion, quality representation. Dr. Buraji, I would, because she represents part of that excluded group. If you look at our political participation and you see what is happening to our parliament, gender representation is a disgrace in Nigeria. And I'm just asking you, Nena, to speak to that. It's to really capture how inclusion can be qualitatively improved and how that can then deal with all the other issues that have come with our democratic project. Yes. Honorable Koje.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm glad you just didn't sequester me to the gender agenda. But let me say that one of the greatest problems that we have, and I listened to Professor Jega speak, was when he spoke about non-inclusion. But again, it's important as well to agree there's a consensus that democracy is imperiled globally. And be it for exclusion, be it because the people are pushing the very levers of constitutional reach, be it because we have very weak centers, and strong people that go out of their way to weaken the structure, systems, and institutions, or be it because it is not truly representative, democracy is obviously imperiled. But as you say, there is absolutely nothing, and everything has been done with regards to inclusion, from sunshine laws to government structures, institutions trying to speak to inclusiveness, to the tokenism by the political parties. But we've come to realize, and the Chinese put it very succinctly, that you can't hold up the sky with one hand. And that's exactly what's happening in Nigeria. That over 50% of the population is excluded from mainstream democratic inclusion. So also, over 70% of our population is below the age of 40. So what is the percentage representation of the youth in Nigeria? It is next to nothing. And I won't speak again about all the other groups. But Professor Jega's paper spoke about an elite consensus. But when you speak about an elite consensus, it is the assumption that there is the well and thriving middle class, that the elite is empowered enough to be a part of the democratic process, that the elite is in the room pissing in, as Professor Patitoni said. But the truth of the matter is that post-COVID, post-bad economic policies, this is the most disempowered that Nigerians have been. And so when you look for that elite consensus that speaks to education, again, as he said, because, of course, one of my favorite quotes on democracy is by JFK, where he says that democracy and learning are indispensable to one another. When you look at the level of illiteracy or lack of education, and even when we do have education in the National Assembly as well as in the governance structures in Nigeria, a large percentage of the people who claim to be educated are roaming the streets with forged certificates. So it therefore brings to the question, whether indeed Nigeria is ready with this elite to drive the conversation. Now, as far as inclusion is concerned, I would always say that for there to be true inclusivity, all of us collectively must have a shared vision. What does Nigeria mean to all of us? For all of us sat here, first of all, most of us are first Igbo, for instance, before Nigerian, or Hausa, for instance, or Fulani, for instance, before Nigerian. We must come to the place where there is the inclusiveness of us, where we have a shared vision. What is the Nigerian vision? And I must ask the question that when all of you who are in the progress or in the movement for democratization, could this ever have been the Nigeria you envisioned? Could this ever have been the country you envisioned, where the truth, where government, rather than get better after 26 years, is retrogressing in such a way that the Constitution does, which is the bulwark of our democracy, has absolutely no use, where the people who are supposed to, who have the most important office in democracy, have been excluded from everything that happens in the country. So
Okay. I mean, it's a very there may be no consensus around that, but at least there is a consensus on the simple fact that we need to do better than we're doing. And that's the point I would like Dr. Bugaje to address. Can democracy thrive where poverty and inequality is rife? Totally inexhaustible, but I want to thank you for highlighting those critical issues you've raised, which coheres with what the speaker actually said around leadership recruitment process. But even when you get leadership recruitment right, and you have people of capacity, competence, and character in office, if it is a majoritarian process based on this cycle of electoralism, every 4 years we roll out the drums to just have elections, we're not going to have democracy. Elections do not a democracy make. Election is an important part of the process, but it is not the sufficient answer to our democratic deficit. And I think, in addition to what you've said, we need to begin to look, if we want national cohesion, we need to begin to look at other forms of representation. I would say proportional representation. We have just had an election in this country in 2023. The winner of the election had 37%.
If you believe the numbers.
And that's 37% of 20% turnout. If you believe the numbers. And we had other people other contestants that had 21%, 18%, and 10%, which we have largely excluded. In countries where democracy has improved, they always build it on national consensus, and every vote will be relevant. Every vote will be taken into account. Majoritarian democracy is not working for us. We need to figure out a proportional representation mechanism that allows every vote to count if we want to improve on our system. I will give
House piecing out. That is one very important thing. But even beyond that, the problem of this country is that we are looking for a messiah. This one great man who will solve our problems. What we need is collective responsibility by a group of elite that hold that person that is called president accountable first to themselves before to the people. And they can say to him, no, you can't go that way. We have agreed as the leaders of this political party that you cannot go that way. I was a young man but involved in the Shagari administration, and I know the kind of consensus that came during that time. My favorite game was looking out from my window in Dodan Barracks. You know, President Shagari was a smoker, but he never smoked inside the office. He would come out to smoke in the field, and I would quickly dash down to go and engage the old man in a chat. And you will see a true Democrat who believed in the views of all the people counting, is not happening today. And that's why we are the mess we are.
No, you've had your chance. We're talking about inclusion.
Well, thank you very much. I've listened to, and thank you for your great contributions, Dr. Bugaji. But I think that with everything that you've highlighted, the leadership selection process, we all speak as if we don't have 2 years to elections. We're speaking as if there is no government today. And I think that what is most important is that the most important office in any democracy is the office of the citizen. And today the citizens exist. And I believe that we don't need to wait for the next election cycle for us to start that consensus that realizes that we are not only equipped to hold government to account, but it is our duty to hold government to account. And so unless and until the citizens in this country decide that we want a democracy that works, are willing to walk that journey by holding the elected to account, we will never get to the place where we have the leadership selection process that we want. We will never have the conversations about representative democracy. We will never have the conversations about inclusion. So I'm going to put it back to the people and say to the people that democracy is not only about the elected, it is more about the people, and the people need to take responsibility.
Absolutely. I want to thank you for put it directly to the celebrant that your job is not finished. Your job has just started. Hajia is not going to take exception to the service you've been rendering. If this office of the citizen must be engaged actively, all of us must play that role. You've been playing it. I totally agree with the speaker who said, my brother can be in Ikotabasi at 8 a.m. in the morning, and he's in Ado-Ekiti by 12 noon, and by 4 p.m. is in Abakaliki, and finally by dinner time you find him in Maiduguri, all in the spirit for pushing national cohesion. That job has to continue. We all must join you in doing it. Congratulations, happy birthday. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for them.